Who's the best? This is a question that has been asked countless times throughout human history for all types of games and competitions. I firmly believe that as long as there's a way for a game to quantify one person's performance against another, you will have somebody who's interested in being the best at it. To that end, if you know where to look, you can find tournaments for all types of video games, but especially for fighting games, as long as you're in a well-populated area. These local tournament scenes are where people with a passion for competing in their favorite games show up to hone their skills and see just how good they are, all while being able to enjoy the company of their fellow players. Fighting game tournaments are just as much about socializing and meeting people as they are about competing, and thus they are deeply entwined with many concepts in social psychology. My name is Taylor, also known as my in-game tag Hailfire, and I've been an active competitor in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the past 3 or so years. I first got interested in competing during my freshman year at Purdue University, where I showed up to our local tournament and got absolutely demolished, which lit the competitive spark in me. Since then, I've been consistently working to improve my skill at the game and entering tournaments both at Purdue and around my home state in New York. I not only get to enjoy the thrill of competition, but I've met tons of cool people and have made some lifelong friends. I want to talk about the many ways concepts from social psychology are intertwined with the experience of competing in Smash. From how they can influence moment-to-moment gameplay, the way they can affect your competitive mentality, and even how they apply to a scene of like-minded competitors as a whole. When playing fighting games at a high level, many interactions essentially come down to being able to get one step ahead of your opponent and predict what they'll do next based on the situation. Are they going to run up and grab you, or are they only threatening it to bait your jump? Are they going to run around just outside your range to bait you into swinging at them, or are they actually going to go in any second now? It's a constant chain of decisions and mind games that makes fighting games such an interesting and dynamic form of competition. Now, any sort of mind game like this is fundamentally linked to psychology, and I found this is especially true for my character of choice, Incineroar! Incineroar is defined by insanely strong close-range moves at the expense of absolutely terrible movement speed. He's the slowest character in the game, and these traits make it really easy for most characters to just run circles around him or throw projectiles at you across the stage. Finding your openings is often a struggle, to say the least. However, the stages in Smash only have so much terrain, and if you're constantly running away, you'll eventually run out of space to retreat to, and now you have to deal with Incineroar's absurd up-close strength. To make this even worse, Incineroar has extremely powerful tools to cover every possible route you could take out of the corner. Try to jump over him, get caught by his arcing up air for tons of damage. Try to roll past him, he'll be waiting with a lethal claw jab. Take too long to pick an option? Incineroar can use a signature move, a lunging grab that can't be blocked, and leads to some of the most ridiculously early kills in the game. There's really no right answer, and this situation is incredibly stressful and fear-inducing for your opponent. Now, research has shown that, more so than any other emotion, fear is extremely effective in persuading us, especially if we're offering a potential out for this fearful situation. Incineroar players have learned to use this phenomenon by instilling fear in their opponent and using it to bait them into doing something predictable by trying to escape the corner, only to meet them there with a brutally strong attack. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about. Having been camped out by this Toon Link player for most of this game, I managed to get him in the corner and the mind games begin. So here you can see that I just tried to cover him jumping to this platform, and then a few moments later he ends up putting a shield up right in front of me. I'm guessing he was hoping that I'd throw out a move here that he could block and then punish, but once he sees that I'm just waiting for him, he is now afraid that he could get caught by my grab before he has any chance to react. Fearing this, and not wanting to jump because he just saw me covering that, he decides to roll instead as it's the last remaining option, but I know that's what he wants, so I'm ready to meet him with a really powerful attack that kills him super early. Another great example is in this set against a Pyramithra player, where I managed to corner him and start out by doing a little jump to threaten an attack and leave a tantalizing opening for him to roll past me. I dashed back and tried to catch the roll, but he did it sooner than I thought and I wasn't able to react. However, this gave me valuable information that he gets antsy when I corner him, and considering how close I got to catching that roll, he's probably not going to try it again. After a little bit more maneuvering, we end back in a similar situation, and I get to cash out on that information I just gathered. As soon as I get him in my threat range, I know he's going to pick something quickly, and I know he doesn't want to roll again. This dude is jumping, and I go to meet him in my loving arms for another ridiculously early kill. Unfortunately, the nature of a read-based character is that sometimes, if you just can't guess right, you're screwed. In particular, I found that confirmation bias can sometimes be a really pervasive issue in my gameplay. I might catch my opponent doing something once or twice and think, oh, I've got their habits figured out, before proceeding to read them incorrectly for the entire rest of the set. A great example of this is from my most recent set against Purdue's second best player, Yash. For some context, I had lost against Yash the week prior, but managed to give him a pretty competitive set despite the fact that I think he's way better than me. A major factor of my good performance was that I did a really good job keeping him cornered. I recognized that he liked to play it slow and take his time to find an opening, usually by trying to jump over me. In response, I would alternate between waiting for him to jump and catching him on the way down, or just really quickly unleashing my grab to punish him for taking too long to do something. However, a player of Yash's skill level just doesn't let a simple flowchart like that work so easily, and in our next set he properly adapted his corner play to beat what I was doing before. And yet, over the course of this set, I just keep trying to make the same reads work despite the fact they're obviously no longer effective. Across all 3 games of this set, I just keep getting hit by Yash doing something aggressive out of the corner because I'm waiting for him to jump or just not expecting it. It happens again, and again, and again, and again. You get the point. There's also several times where he uses his double jump just before I could hit him on the way down, and I keep falling for it. And yet, there's a small handful of times where I still manage to catch him that lets confirmation bias keep its iron grip on me. I'm not gonna lie, I can't help but cringe a little bit watching this setback. Getting constantly caught by the same aggressive options across all 3 games is pretty embarrassingly bad adaptation on my part, and watching it back, it is so obvious what I was doing wrong. But despite that, while I was playing, confirmation bias had me fixate solely on catching the same options he had been doing in our prior set rather than adapting to the new information that was right in front of me. Self-serving attributions are absolutely everywhere in pretty much anything competitive, but I'd say they're especially prevalent in competitive video games. In any team-based game like League of Legends, you'd be hard-pressed to go an entire play session without somebody blaming their teammates for a loss.
Thought he was gonna win his game, right? But it's like I had Comet 7 on my team and Isis, and it's like I just wanna...
People just love to diminish the role their game skill played in their loss and find some part of the game or situation to blame it on. In the Smash community, these excuses are colloquially referred to as Johns or Johnning, I don't know why, and absolutely nobody is immune to it, myself included. One place I've found that self-serving biases are especially impactful for me is when I have to practice the game online. It's basically necessary to continuously play the game in order to keep up with your competition, and that usually means needing to play online. Unfortunately, Smash Ultimate is infamous for having particularly bad online play with a lot of lag that can be made even worse if one of the 2 players has a bad connection. Because fighting games are so reliant on making really quick decisions and reacting to things, even 1/10 of a second of delay can feel absolutely horrible to play with. Not being able to react as well also totally changes how some of the more nuanced dynamics of competition work out, and that means that sometimes players who are really good offline can be much less capable when playing on Wi-Fi. I've always had such a hard time getting meaningful practice online because it's so hard for me to resist making self-serving attributions. The second I begin losing on Wi-Fi, I get an immediate urge to tell myself, this dude is so carried by Wi-Fi, I would absolutely smoke him offline. This is made even worse because of tilt, a gaming term that essentially marries self-serving attributions to the frustration-aggression theory. Tilt is a term used to describe a state of enraged persistence where a player loses a game and immediately goes back in to redeem themselves because, quote, I didn't deserve to lose that last one. There's a clear frustration at your goals being blocked in a way you perceive as unjustified, and as you continue trying again and again to get the win you feel owed, your aggression just keeps building and building. That aggression usually results in people playing significantly more reckless and impatient, probably causing them to lose even more, and creating a really vicious cycle of frustration and anger that can result in some very nasty rage directed at the other player. The combination of self-serving attributions and tilt is so hard for me to resist when I'm playing Smash Online, even though I know how detrimental it is to my improvement. Being able to blame all my losses on a bad connection causes me to completely disregard what I could actually be doing better to win, and once the tilt snowball starts, any hope of meaningful practice is out the window. This just really demonstrates how hard it is to resist self-serving attributions. Even when I'm fully aware of how self-sabotaging they are, I still feel like I need to have the patience of a monk to stay composed during a session of Wi-Fi grinding. My personal challenges around practicing Smash Online has meant I've had to find pretty good ways of fitting my improvement into the few times a week I play with people offline or attend a tournament. Considering I've gone from one of the absolute worst players at Purdue's weeklies to being ranked in Purdue's top 10, I'd say I've managed to do a pretty good job of developing improvement strategies. I find that I tend to approach most problems with a pretty scientific method, and in particular I think my methods for improving at Smash are actually very similar to the ways psychologists can approach their research. Essentially, every time I go to bracket, I spend some time beforehand watching back videos of me playing so I can form a hypothesis about one or two things I should be doing differently. From there, the upcoming bracket becomes my experiment where I get to see if this change correlates to better placements or closer sets with players that usually beat me. Overall, I would say this improvement method especially captures the pros and cons of correlational research, which was particularly demonstrated by a 2-week stretch of tournaments over this past summer. So there I was, on a train headed to one of the local tournaments near me, doing my regular ritual of reviewing gameplay videos in order to figure out my latest hypothesis. Eventually, I settled on the idea that I've been respecting my opponents too much and I'm playing too scared to get hit, and it stops me from using the full offensive strength of my character. Thus, I showed up to the bracket as the 20th seed out of 27 players and suddenly started playing the best I had played all summer. I was finding so many openings in my opponent's defense and was cornering them with relative ease, and I managed to make 3 separate upsets in a row on a run to 9th place. During another bracket the next day, I managed to take my first set off of a player named Local Man Matty who had previously beaten me multiple times, and even managed to keep a game close against Ling, who's a former top 50 player in the world. At a monthly tournament that Saturday, my first opponent in bracket was a player named Mega who had previously been ranked in 2 very strong states, New Jersey and Connecticut. And I won. I think this set was probably the best I've ever played, and to this day this is still statistically the best player I've ever taken a set from. My fire just kept going into another bracket the next week too. I had an incredibly close set with the 3rd ranked player in my region named 0 to None and barely got stopped from making the upset. I felt like I'd finally hit on the perfect hypothesis that was the missing piece to my playstyle all along. Now I was consistently threatening or beating players I never could have even touched before. Then it just stopped. Even though I was still trying to play with the same fearless mentality, my results became pretty inconsistent. My average placement had definitely gotten better, but I just wasn't able to consistently threaten ranked players anymore. Whatever had clicked for me had just kind of fallen apart. Overall, this anecdote shows many of the strengths and weaknesses of the correlational research style of improvement I use. While the convenience allowed me to evolve my playstyle in the limited time I got to attend in-person brackets, I also ended up being unable to replicate my findings because of some other unknown variables that had helped contribute to my perfect playstyle. I still haven't been able to figure it out again. Not all improvement in Smash is limited to just gameplay though. Often, your mentality going into a bracket set is just as important as your overall strategy or playstyle. While basically every player has their days where they're hot and their days where they're not, finding a mindset that allows you to stay at a consistent level of performance can be essential to being a tournament threat. Unfortunately, developing this mindset is also a lot harder than improving your gameplay. The factors that go into a healthy competitive mindset are unique to each person and elusive even to our own brains. However, I've found that self-perception theory has offered me a lot of insight on what my ideal mental state should be when playing in bracket. In particular, self-perception has helped me settle on an attitude that is completely backwards and nonsensical, but I can't deny that it's helped me perform very consistently across many brackets. It's the fact that the less I try to play well, the better I play. There were 2 main brackets I want to highlight where observing my behavior, or in this case my gameplay, helped me develop this strange, unusual attitude. The first was the last tournament of the fall 2023 school semester, which had basically all of Purdue's best players in attendance. With this tournament being crucial for solidifying my place in our top 10, I was doing everything in my power to make sure I'd play well that day. I practiced non-stop all week, and I was trying to use all my brain power to solve my opponent's habits and make good decisions in warm-up games. But I was playing horribly. I just could not stop losing in practice games. I told myself it's okay, I always play better in bracket, I'll just lock in. And, well, that didn't exactly work out.
You don't think it?
It's just a good game though. And like you said, like, it's 100%. Oh.
Alright.
But good luck. That's what you said.
World takes it convincingly 2 stock.
Seals game 1 out.
Gets to air dodge speed. Freaking air dodge speed into 60% off one into the kill?
Will you get that?
Yes! Wow, quick 0 to death from Taylor. Wow, that here. Oh, one side being here and it could be about even.
Up against the roast here?
Oh, I
At that point, I was a completely nervous wreck. I just could not understand why I was playing so badly despite my efforts to the contrary. I ended up leaving the room and called a friend to help me calm down, and they managed to convince me that it's not a big deal to lose and to just go and have fun. And so I went to play somebody who had been cooking me in warm-ups earlier, accepting the fact that today just wasn't my day, and I beat him convincingly. Huh. So then I went to play my next opponent on stream, and suddenly I was playing great. After clutching out in another extremely close set afterwards, I realized I had gotten top 8 at the hardest tournament of the year all because I had stopped trying. It didn't make any sense to me, but I was honestly so overcome with relief that I really didn't think much of it at the time. The second part of the story takes place during winter break, where I was able to show up to one of my local tournaments for the first time in months. Unfortunately, the day before I had gotten my flu and COVID shots and caught some kind of sickness from one of my friends. So needless to say, I felt like death. I still wanted to show up just to see people again, and I told myself I am literally fighting 3 illnesses at the same time right now, and I am definitely going to play horribly. That's completely fine. And then when I went to start playing friendlies, I was actually playing pretty good. Despite just how atrocious I felt, I was playing well above my average and ended up having a pretty solid bracket run that seemed like an absolute miracle considering my condition. Reflecting on these 2 experiences led me to an utterly baffling conclusion. I just play so much worse when I try to play well. It's so backwards and unintuitive, it makes absolutely no sense, but I could only arrive at this conclusion by perceiving my own behaviors and reflecting on them to develop a new attitude. Unfortunately though, there are definitely some negative parts of my competitive mentality that I understand perfectly well, but just can't seem to shake. In particular, I've continuously struggled with a desire to conform to the playstyles of my friends in the Purdue Smash scene. For a bit of context, most of Purdue's top-ranked players use characters that are considered fairly honest, meaning they rely on fundamental game skills like spacing or tricky movement to secure a victory instead of like gimmicks or taking high-risk gambles. There are some exceptions. We have multiple top Steve players, we have a few good Kazuya's, and then of course, we have Incineroar. Incineroar is definitely not an honest character.
Close this out because keep in mind it is do or die for SkyJ here, and it looks like he's not dying, baby. He's doing.
Despite the fact that a lot of these clips are honestly really funny to me, I also can't help but feel bad for the other player who kinda got robbed. This is especially exacerbated by the fact that, frankly, all of my closest friends in Purdue Smash play pretty honest characters, and most of them really don't like fighting Incineroar. They're absolutely entitled to their opinion. This character is definitely bullshit sometimes, but that also creates a normative influence for me that has impacted my competitive mentality in a couple ways. More specifically, I believe that normative influence has had a very significant effect on my playstyle. See, while Incineroar has a lot of very good high-risk, high-reward moves that can be used to absolutely rob people, he also has a very good set of more standard tools that would be considered fairly honest. My playstyle tends to heavily rely on his more honest moves while saving the higher-risk stuff as a mix-up to catch my opponent off guard. It's not necessarily a bad way to approach the character, but it definitely limits my options sometimes. I mean, one of the main reasons I play this way is I just think that, man, I would hate to be playing against an Incin who just looks to cheese me, and I want to be a player people enjoy playing against. Is this totally irrational? Yeah. Should I care about this? Absolutely not. I should just be playing to win. But many decades of experiments have shown that the desire to conform trumps rationality in most situations, and I just can't help but resist the urge to conform to the more honest playstyle of my peers. Competing at your local fighting game tournament is about so much more than showing up, winning and losing a few sets, and then leaving. You get to meet so many awesome people from all walks of life, and all unified by a desire to get really good at a video game. The competitive Smash scene is a truly global phenomenon as well. There are players from a variety of nations traveling all over the world to prove themselves in the fires of competition. With that said, for almost the entirety of Smash Ultimate's competitive lifespan, there have really only been 2 regions that are indisputably the best. North America, mainly the US and Mexico, and Japan. While the North American scene and the Japanese scene occasionally get to intermix at major tournaments, for the most part they're mostly competing against themselves, and that's where they get most of their practice. A fascinating trend that has evolved from this is that each region approaches the game in completely different ways. It's almost like they've created a different culture for what competitive play looks like between Japan and North America. Ask any North American Smash players travel to Japan to compete about their experience, and they will all tell you the same thing. The Japanese play style is defined by keeping it safe and being as optimal and risk-averse as possible. They always favor the correct option no matter what.
So, historically speaking, Japan has always been a region of more safe defensive play, right? Compared to anywhere else in the world. They just kind of love like poking you out with like safe buttons, really not committing a neutral, waiting for the openings. Even for Advantage State, you notice for Advantage State, American players are a lot more like go out like risky edge guards and like combos, juggles, ledge chops, whatever. Whereas Japanese players love to just play it safe with their edge guard, their juggle, their combos, their ledge trap, whatever.
Conversely, many Japanese players who travel to a major tournament in Mexico or the US are consistently caught off guard by just how aggressive North American players can be and how fast-paced their play is. The way each region values safety and defense versus offensive play can be clearly seen from the top player rankings, where almost across the board North America's players prefer more aggressive characters and playstyles. Just within the latest top 50 ranking, top North American players such as Spargo, Light, Riddles, MKLeo, Cola, Skyj, and Mutace all use characters with really high risk, high reward offense, suffocating pressure, or extremely highly damaging combos. In comparison, top Japanese players such as Akola, Mia, Shuton, T, Kameme, Ken, Yara, and Proto Banham all wield characters that can control the pace of a game with minimal risk and maintain a rock-solid defense. The clear difference in top-level character representation shows how two mostly separate competitive scenes can come to approach the same game in completely different ways. We might only be able to speculate about why they might have diverged, but it's clear that over the course of many years, Japanese Smash has created a culture valuing defensive play and consistency, while North America has come to value relentless and powerful offense. This trend has even continued as new generations of players have risen to the top. North America's biggest young star is Spargo, and he is unmatched in his offensive pressure and ability to break apart someone's defense. On the other hand, Akola and Mia are currently the two best Japanese players and are paragons of ruthlessly efficient defensive play, piloting what has been eloquently described as, "thanks for trying to play the game" characters. Now that he's here, we have to talk about Steve. Across Smash's massive 87 character roster, there is absolutely no character in the game that people hate anywhere near as much as the guy from Minecraft. He's the undisputed best character in the game with an overpowered moveset that offers insane damage and combos and really early kills with very little risk. His ability to place blocks around the stage allows him to camp in a way that almost no character can contest, or set up ridiculous situations that only the Steve player really knows how to deal with. As many people have put it, Steve breaks the rules of the game with his blocks, and as a result he's become an extremely heated topic amongst the community. There have been countless stories of previously unknown and often very young players picking up Steve and suddenly getting incredible results at big tournaments, upsetting many well-established top players out of absolutely nowhere. This led to an outcry for Steve to be banned because of how he warped the game and the seeming ease with which Steve players could get fantastic results that normally take years of work to achieve. After some development, Steve ended up getting banned across most of North America, but because Japan didn't follow suit, most of these bans ended up being rolled back in order to prevent the two regions from coming completely divided. Still, the enduring divide in the community from the Steve ban debate is a classic example of a conflict in regards to social psychology. The pro-Steve and the anti-Steve crowds have simply incompatible goals and perspectives on what a healthy competitive Smash scene looks like. As demonstrated in Sharif's Robert's Cave camp experiment, zero-sum games and competition in general can foster very deep animosity among conflicting groups, and that is certainly the case in the Smash scene. All of this has led to a lot of hate and negativity directed towards Steve players, and top representatives such as Akola and Onan have been pretty vocal about the hate they receive and the impact it has on their mental health. Now, to be fully transparent, I completely believe that Steve should have been banned globally, and I think he allows you to shortcut many skills you need to be good with literally any other character. Obviously, the people who are sending death threats to literal children are complete scum of the earth, but if I have to be honest, I really dislike this character. I also should probably mention now that Purdue's current #1 player, Camocat, is primarily a Steve main. Even though I'm more than happy to recognize that Camo is a very talented player and has proven that she is capable of winning with other characters, I still can't help but roll my eyes and shake my head watching her Steve win almost every week. However, when a large tournament comes around in Indiana and Purdue's top talent heads out to represent our scene, I've noticed my feelings about watching Camocat Steve just totally change. I'm not upset about watching Steve anymore, and I'm way more focused on cheering for a fellow Boilermaker and celebrating a win for our scene. In this scenario, Camocat's social identity is no longer part of an out-group of mine, Steve players versus non-Steve players, but rather part of an in-group for me, Purdue versus everyone else. I'll watch somebody die to a ridiculous combo and I'm cheering "Boiler up, Purdue sweep" instead of lamenting the fact that this character isn't banned. This is a fantastic example of how in-group bias can completely change how we interpret somebody's actions. On the subject of regional pride, let's talk about the phenomenon of the home field advantage, something that's been represented across basically every sport ever and a classic example of social facilitation. One might think that it doesn't apply to Smash. I mean, we aren't exactly playing in massive stadiums adorned with team logos, but it's actually quite the opposite. Whenever a major tournament is held, there's a tendency from players from the region hosting the major to perform especially well as they're motivated to defend their home region and represent the scene. The most enduring example of this comes from New York's biggest annual Smash major, Let's Make Big Moves, hosted right in the heart of New York City. Let's Make Big Moves has a unique history in that it's been won by a player from the tri-state area during each of its 5 iterations, despite none of the winners ever actually being the first seed. While all of these tournament runs are pretty interesting to talk about, I want to especially highlight the story of Let's Make Big Moves 2022, where a player from my home region of Westchester, New York made history as the lowest seed to ever win a major tournament in North America. And that player was Quid. Quid was not a super well-known player before this tournament, coming in as just the 32nd seed. Certainly respectable, but nothing particularly noteworthy. And yet what followed was one of the most legendary tournament runs in Ultimate history, where Quid defeated a gauntlet of top players including Moxie, Tilde, and 2 players ranked top 5 in the US at the time in Mudes and Cola. It's hard to overstate just how insane it was to see so many big names get swept by a player few people outside of Tri-State knew about. Just watch this footage of Grand Finals and listen to how electric the venue was for their hometown hero.
Oh man, we are picking it up.
Damn.
Okay, got a little overzealous though. Nice back there to seal it away. Absolutely needed that. One more stock chance coming up. The crowd still believes. Deficit be damned. We think you can get the job done now. It is, man. Ride or die. What you got for me right now? A little flower power.
Okay, hold on. Oh, the little movement right there. He was close to catching him with that wasteland.
Oh my God!
Okay, barely living. Cola, gotta watch himself. Does get the recovery back to the ledge. Quit just a little too quick on that down air.
He's looking for it. He's feeling it. Season up, and there it is in dramatic 3-0 fashion. Your Let's Make Big Moves 2022 champion, that boy Quid.
Hey, yo!
Even beyond the Let's Make Big Move series, there's plenty of other iconic examples of players putting on unbelievable performances to defend their home turf. Cola and Fatality at CEO 2021 or Gluttony at Terra 2023 are other examples of players getting unbelievable power-ups and making insane upsets to defend their home turf as the crowd roars behind them. As I've mentioned, going to a tournament is just as much about meeting and hanging out with people as it is about actually playing the game. From the perspective of social psychology, there's a lot of interesting dynamics around socializing in a scene based around competition, especially in regards to how skill level can influence your ability to make friends. At a basic level, skill at the game is obviously a desirable attribute in the eyes of fellow competitors, and in my experience, getting better at the game definitely feels like it makes you more popular. That's not to say somebody needs to be a good player to make friends, but it certainly helps, and I have a few theories as to why that is. For one, I found that one of the best ways to establish a base level friendliness with somebody is to have played them in a bracket game, possibly due to the mere exposure effect. The better you are, the more games you'll play in bracket, allowing the mere exposure effect to lay the seeds for more friendships. Additionally, a player who remains in the bracket for more rounds is likely to stay at the venue longer than a player who gets eliminated early, giving them more opportunities to talk to people and make friends. The correlation between skill and popularity also contains an element of the reward theory of attraction. One of the best ways to improve is to get advice from better players, and so befriending a high-skill player offers obvious rewards that makes them especially attractive as friends. For what it's worth, this is also not a completely one-way street, as now that I've become one of the better players in my scene, I find it extremely fulfilling to help out players on their own improvement journey. Part of this might be due to the reciprocity norm, as I myself got a ton of advice from a top Purdue player named Lope that was essential to my growth as a player. Lope had always told me that he really enjoyed helping people because he wanted to see the Purdue scene grow as strong as possible, and I feel like I'm reciprocating his help by contributing to that goal with my own coaching. There are also an element of the social responsibility norm, where we feel compelled to help people who can't easily help themselves. I found it's often very difficult to understand how to improve past a certain skill level, as many players can be held back by subtle flaws in their strategy that are really hard to pinpoint without more experience. I definitely struggled with that myself, and I know how getting perspective from a better player can make a world of difference in figuring out the next step to improving. Because of this, I find it especially gratifying to give others the help I had always needed. Another common tendency I've observed is that players will make friends with people around their skill level, kind of reflecting the matching phenomenon of relationships. To some extent, I think the base level explanation of the matching phenomenon applies here, but there are a few other unique interpretations I also want to discuss. For one, most people simply have the most fun playing against somebody close to their skill level because the games are pretty competitive. If the skill gap is too large, the games can end up being fairly boring, and it makes it harder to bond by playing against each other. Another possible interpretation is that people of similar skill will usually be eliminated from the main bracket around the same time, and thus they're likely to pair up with each other to start playing some friendlies. This can easily lead to somebody becoming a regular partner for casual games after you both get eliminated, and it's a great way to open the door to a lasting friendship outside the tournament venue. In fact, this is how me and my now roommate Tommy, aka Ash Goku, became friends.